They called it a small mistake. A signature here, a handful of papers there. I called it the end of everything I'd built. If you believe that every story matters, not just the loud ones, subscribe now to Grandma Untold True Stories. Hit the bell, and stay with us so no one's truth is ever erased. I didn't grow up in Portland, Oregon, but I made it my home by the time I was 50. I planted roses along the front walk of the bungalow on Larchwood, red, pink, white. Every spring they curled open like promises. My name is Eleanor Baxter, used to be teacher at Fernwood Middle, made lesson plans, baked cinnamon rolls, paid my mortgage on time. I never thought I'd wake up one morning to find that house slipping from under me. They said it was administrative housekeeping when Mark brought the folder to the kitchen table. Small paperwork just to update property records. They told me to trust them. Mark, my son, kind voice, easy smile, the one who used to call me Mama Bear. He said it would be painless. Nina, his wife, hovered nearby. She held my tea so I didn't spill, reminded me to rest because of the arthritis in my fingers. I nodded. I believed them because that's what mothers do. Trust first, ask questions later. That was April. I signed. I saw pages, lines, signatures. I squinted at the small print, asked if I needed a lawyer. Mark laughed, the lightest laugh I've ever hated. Mama, it's just routine. Just makes things easier. Nina poured chamomile. It was labeled gentle, safe, like birthing a dream. I sipped. Too sweet, not enough bite. A month later, the mailbox stopped coming with my name on it. The electric bill, addressed to me, went to Mark's email. Real estate tax forms notices they changed owner to Mark. I found the original deed missing from the filing cabinet. The old armchair I used to rest in moved to the garage. The living room lamp I had cherished since my late husband died gone. They said I was forgetful. They said maybe I was muddled with age. Nina told me one afternoon. Sometimes less responsibility lets your spirit breathe. My spirit felt broken. I stood on the back porch under Oregon rain. The kind that mutes colors and makes wood smell ancient, and I clutched an old beige cardigan. My daughter-in-law had thrown it in the trash with the bad sweaters months ago. Said it was shading the aesthetic. But now she handed it to me like I was leaving. Cold drops pattered on the railing. Mark didn't wait for goodbye. He folded his arms, shoulders straight, his face calm. Not angry, not compassionate, relieved. That hurt more than the damp. I remember the neighbor, Mrs. Calhoun, leaning over her fence. "Eleanor, are you locked out?" she asked, voice soft, concern heavy. Mark cracked open the door a sliver and said, "She signed everything willingly. Said the traffic noise was too much up here." He looked me straight in the eyes when he lied. "Old folks sign things sometimes blindly," he added with a shrug. "If you can't read, don't blame the paper." That sentence, I will never forget it. Snow in Wisconsin is brutal. Let me tell you, I know, but rain in Portland wets you through bone deep. That afternoon, I pulled the cardigan tighter and said nothing. I took the porch steps slowly. I had built those steps, repaired them, sanded them, painted them. I used to climb ladders despite bone spurs in my feet, thinking I'd never need help. The door shut behind me with a slam that echoed like betrayal. That house was mine since 1983, the place I raised Mark after Henry, my husband, took the train to work at the diner earlier than dawn. It was mine when Henry died in '98, and I kept the plumbing fixed, washed his shirts, mended socks, planted those roses each year anyway. It was mine when I stayed up nights listening to the rain on the roof, wondering if the vapor barrier had rotted, fearful the roof would leak like our hearts had. When Mark moved me in with him after my knee replacement, Nina said it was temporary. She said she loved me. But before too long, Nina started calling the guest room her office, walked through the kitchen and said, "Oh, this tile clashes with my pillows," and rearranged the curtains without asking. I told myself maybe I'm oversensitive. Maybe it's just living close together. But water leaking into my phone from heavy rain, hearing closed bathroom doors, voices raised behind thick walls. Those are not mistakes. They weren't loud about it. They didn't need to be. Silence is a blade sharpened with habit. I watched Nina label things in the fridge, N, after each item she claimed. I watched Mark change the locks for safety, and shrug when I worried I'd be locked out. I remember the night they replaced the stove. They said it was to modernize. They moved my pots. Every pan I could reach was warped. The rest? Too high for my arthritic hands. They said it would be better for Nina's aesthetic. One evening, Nina came in while I was washing dishes, singing softly like I used to when Mark was little. She wrinkled her nose at the smell of tomato stew lingering. "We're switching to induction heat," she said. "Less grease. More sleek." She snapped off the kitchen lights sometimes without asking, muttering about energy use. The house felt like someone else's idea of home. I started keeping track. A notebook under my Bible. Dates. Times. Voices. Paperwork. Conversations. Mark saying things like, "Mama, you don't need to worry about this." Nina whispering over her phone, "House business is done." I saved screenshots. Took photos. The folder from the bank said joint ownership. The signature lines highlighted in yellow, marked mandatory. I still didn't fully understand, but I understood enough. That small mistake was a lie. They changed the Wi-Fi password and didn't tell me. They said I was being too loud, that my television interfered with the signal. I started walking early, just to get out of the house. Rain soaked my shoes. Evening damp crept into old joints. I slipped once on the porch. Mark saw me from inside, but did not come. "Be more careful," he said after I bled. No bandage. No question. Just that. Then came the realtor's brochure, slid across the kitchen counter. Nina's handwriting circled a few words. Senior community. 0 steps. Amenities. Low maintenance. She said it in passing. "Just options, Mom. For when you're ready." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept smelling jasmine tea Nina bought for me once, trying to mask something older and stronger. But I was not broken. Not yet. I remembered my friend, Lydia, who practiced elder law. I pulled out an envelope from years ago. Protective trust documents, signed, notarized. Something Lydia had advised about when Henry was alive. I tucked them into the back wall of the linen closet. At night, the house would creak and rain would slide off the roof in thin sheets. I would sit, flashlight under blankets, listening in corners. Nina's voice, Mark's laughter, the hush of business being made without me. The cardigan I was given the day I was asked to leave. It smelled like mothballs and lavender, like forgetting and apology. I kept it near the bed. In the weeks after the signature, I called Lydia. Sent her scans of those yellow flag papers. Asked her what exactly I signed. She explained the clauses. The deed transfer. The joint ownership line. The medical capacity requirement. I didn't have decline. Not one doctor ever said I wasn't competent. My heart hollows slowly when the betrayal is in whisper. When people you raised call you fragile, feeble, forgetful. I watched Nina take old photos off the wall. Mark said they were dated aesthetics. Wedding photos, Henry's hat, childhood drawings gone. I found some in the attic, scraped off dust, held in trembling hands. And yet, through every dark turn, I stored evidence. I recorded conversations with my flip phone, the one Mark told me I'd never need anymore. It still turned on. I hid it under pillows, behind bookshelves. On days when Nina's voice rose and Mark's tone sharpened, I let the phone listen. I did not see the courtroom yet. Not this part. But I saw candlelight of truth shining through cracks. I saw a path back. I saw the shape of reclaiming. They thought I was disappearing. I let them believe I was fading. I asked Mark about the deed over coffee. He chuckled, said I didn't read it, didn't worry. I asked Nina about the plans, about where I would go. She said Greenwood Residences had good reviews. She said I'd have company. I believed I'd have dignity. I saw the future as something they shaped for me, not something I would shape back. I don't want the first part to end on sorrow. I want you to understand what the many little betrayals look like. How a signature supposedly small becomes a lever lifting the weight off hands that once held so much. Because the truth is, he might have changed the locks, but he didn't change my name in the history I owned. She might have said her aesthetic needed less clutter, but she didn't clean the memories from these walls. And I might have signed, but I never surrendered. I want you to stay with me, because next time, that's when I begin gathering proof, when I begin walking toward the room where the law keeps secrets. when I stopped letting them write the story by themselves. The truth is, silence can be mistaken for senility when people have already decided you're obsolete. So I let them mistake me. I wore soft slippers and sipped my sweet tea. I hummed lullabies when I did laundry and pretended I couldn't remember what day it was. But I knew. I was watching. And I was documenting everything. The phone I kept, small gray flip style, with a battery that outlasted everyone's expectations, became my shield. I taped it under the dining table once, just to catch a full dinner conversation. Mark and Nina were laughing. Nina said, "We'll sell the house this summer. It's clean now, feels fresh, like she was never here." Mark agreed. "We've made it ours. She barely notices." That's what they believed. That I was gone long before I left. I wasn't gone. I was listening. I recorded conversations in whispers, in giggles, in the dead of night. I slid the phone behind the bookshelf where Nina stored her decor magazines. I buried it under towels in the bathroom cabinet. I captured everything. Every time they joked about my dementia, about my limited window, about how convenient it all had been. Nina once said, "She won't even fight us. Guilt makes them too polite." And Mark, laughing, replied, "It's not guilt, it's helplessness. She's just waiting to die." I heard it all. The old trust papers Lydia had helped me sign years ago? I kept those too. I scanned them at the public library, just before they changed the passwords again. I mailed copies to Lydia and hid the originals in a Ziploc bag behind the dryer vent. That's where they stayed, behind lint and heat and silence, safe. Nina never touched that machine. Too dirty, too loud. But the walls in that house whispered, and I listened with everything I had. They thought they'd won. That I'd been swept neatly off their modern floor plans, like a misplaced piece of old furniture. But even discarded things have edges. I watched Nina catalog the silverware online. Watched Mark ask his friend, a man I'd never met, about listing strategies and minimal disclosures. I listened as they measured the walls, not for repainting, but for staging. A for sale sign appeared in the garage one afternoon, leaning behind the suitcases. The next day, I found my rocking chair at the curb. No one told me. No one warned me. They just decided I didn't need it anymore. I kept walking past it for an hour, rain misting the sidewalk. I didn't bring it back inside. I didn't touch it. I left it there for the garbage truck, because I needed them to think I had no fight left. Nina waved as she walked by, smoothie in hand, earbuds in. "Less clutter," she said. "It's not ergonomic." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the laundry room beneath the single bulb, the same one they put on a motion sensor to save energy, and I stared at the ceiling. I whispered to myself, they erased me from the deed, but not from the foundation. I remembered laying tile in the kitchen with Henry, arguing over grout color. I remembered the time Mark spilled root beer in the back hallway and tried to mop it up with his socks. The memories, they hadn't deleted them. They just buried them under Pinterest-approved renovations and appliance upgrades. And I still had that trust document. Lydia called me one morning after reviewing everything. "Eleanor," she said, "what they did, it doesn't hold. If we can prove your capacity at the time of the signature and show coercion, we have a strong case. Especially with the trust in place. It supersedes transfer." I sat still. The sun was filtering through the narrow window above the dryer. I hadn't felt sunlight in weeks. "Can you come in?" she asked. "We'll build the file quietly." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." I left the house that day and walked to the bus stop. I didn't tell Mark. I didn't ask permission. I had 2 quarters and an old canvas tote. At the law office, I handed Lydia everything. Flash drives. Scans. Photos. The trust. I showed her a short video I recorded on my phone, Mark, in the kitchen, saying she didn't even read it. She just signed like always. I watched her eyes narrow. "We'll call this Exhibit A." We started building. We contacted a geriatric specialist for an official mental capacity exam. I passed with flying colors. I even corrected the psychologist when he misquoted a poem. Lydia called a handwriting expert to verify the odd spacing in my signature on the new deed. Drugged, she suspected. The tea. Too sweet. My memory didn't lie. Mark's voice on the tapes was calm, calculated. "It's legal if she signs it, right?" he said to Nina. "We didn't force her. She just trusted me. That's not fraud, it's family." Nina's voice was colder. "No one's going to care, Mark. Old women lose their homes all the time. She should be grateful we let her stay this long." I could have screamed, but I didn't. I smiled. I kept cleaning their dishes. I thanked them for the water bill they no longer let me see. I let Nina bring over her sister and talk about decluttering the soul, while sipping wine they stored in my pantry. I even offered to wash their laundry one last time. And as I folded Nina's workout tops, I tucked another flash drive between the layers. They never noticed. They didn't see me anymore. But soon the law would. The court date was set without them knowing. Lydia filed a quiet title action, based on the trust, the recordings, the medical records. We asked for an emergency injunction. We requested the house be frozen in all transactions. The judge agreed to review it without notifying the current deed holders, because technically, the transfer had never been valid in the first place. They found out when the listing agent called Mark to cancel. The house was flagged in court. "Legal complications," the agent said. "Needs resolution before we proceed." That night, Mark stormed into the laundry room. He looked tired, angrier than I had ever seen. "Did you talk to someone?" he asked, voice low, dangerous. "What's going on?" I looked up from the blanket I was folding. "You're upset," I said softly. "You should drink some tea." He didn't laugh. "You're sabotaging us," he said. "You're making this harder than it has to be." I stood. I walked to the dryer. I opened the old hollowed-out copy of Wuthering Heights and took out the flash drive. I turned, held it up. "You made this hard, Mark. I just remembered." His face turned pale. The next week, the hearing was set. I'll tell you what happened then. How the courtroom sounded, what Nina wore, and how I walked in with my coat buttoned high. But not yet. Because before that moment, I had one more thing to do. I had to remember who I was and say it out loud. To myself. To Lydia. And to the quiet house that thought it had erased me. The house felt different once the court filing went through. Not to them. Mark and Nina still floated around like royalty in a castle built from someone else's bricks. But to me, I could feel it. The walls didn't lean in the same way. The air didn't hum with defeat. It was like the house knew justice was on its way. I kept to myself as always. I folded napkins. I watered the plants Nina never touched. I asked if they needed anything from the store, even though they never trusted me with a credit card anymore. Mark told me to just relax. He'd ordered me a book on aging gracefully. It came in the mail wrapped in eco-conscious packaging with a note inside. "For the next chapter of your journey, breathe and let go." Let go? I held that book in my lap that afternoon and stared at the title. The Gentle Descent. What a name. Like the world expected me to fall, not rise. Like it was a kindness to be forgotten slowly. I didn't read a word of it. I took it to the basement and placed it gently in the donation box with Nina's broken yoga mat and Mark's cracked fondue pot. Then I sat on the edge of my narrow laundry room bed and whispered to myself, I am not descending. I am reclaiming. The court date loomed closer. Lydia called every few days, firm but kind, checking if I felt ready. I told her I'd been ready since the moment Nina called me a ghost. It happened on a Sunday. The house had guests, people from Mark's tech job. They all wore beige, smiled with teeth, drank sparkling water in stemless wine glasses. Nina floated around them in linen and lip gloss, giving a tour. I stayed in the laundry room, like I was supposed to. Later, when the guests were gone, she came downstairs and found me knitting. "Oh, I didn't realize you were here," she said. "I live here," I replied. She laughed. "No, I mean I didn't hear you. You move so quietly. Like a ghost." A ghost. She didn't say it with venom. She said it with amusement. Like I was something she could laugh off. Like I was a phase of the house, not a person. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote those words down. Like a ghost. They'd regret that. Not out of spite, but because ghosts, when remembered properly, become legends. And legends don't stay buried. The week before court, I played the long game. I let Nina tell me about her new kitchen remodel ideas. She wanted quartz, said the marble had too much visual chaos. I nodded. I made her a cup of tea. When she complimented the flavor, I smiled and said, "It's your favorite. Serenity, right?" She blinked. "How did you know?" I remembered everything. The day before we were due in court, I found the old tin box I used to keep recipes in. Tucked behind my mother's oatmeal pie instructions and Henry's chili notes was a letter I had written to myself 6 years ago. A list of things to hold on to. It said, your memory, your dignity, your name on the house, your voice. I hadn't seen that letter in years. But there it was, written in my handwriting, signed with certainty. That letter became my compass. I slept poorly the night before court. Not because I was scared, but because I was awake remembering every detail they hoped I had forgotten. Every word, every look, every decision made without me about me. The courthouse was a tall building made of concrete and old hopes. I wore my Sunday coat, not the one Nina handed me like a pity prize, but the deep green wool one Henry bought me for our 25th anniversary. The lining was frayed, but it still smelled like lemon balm and mothballs. Lydia met me outside. She didn't hug me. She knew I didn't like being touched when I was focused. She just nodded. "You ready?" I nodded back. I've been ready since they called me a mistake. Inside, the courtroom was colder than I expected. Mark sat at the defendant's table, wearing a suit too sleek for his personality. Nina looked smaller than usual. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were darting around the room like they were looking for an exit that didn't exist. Lydia set the recordings on the table. The trust document, the signed capacity report, the flash drive, everything I had collected, each moment I had kept alive. The judge entered. Honorable Phyllis Crane. Hair silver, voice like pressed velvet. She adjusted her glasses and looked at both parties. Then she turned to Lydia. "Ms. Wells," she said. "Proceed." Lydia didn't waste time. She laid it out clearly. The trust, the protective clause, the transfer made without proper consent. The recordings, the statements, the proof of full mental clarity, the documented changes in living conditions, the emotional manipulation. When the audio clips played, I didn't watch the judge. I watched Mark. His face tightened as he heard himself say, "It was like taking candy from a baby." I watched Nina flinch as her voice played. "She won't fight. They never do." They sat through 30 minutes of their own words turned into evidence. When Lydia finished, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Baxter," she said, "would you like to speak?" I stood. My knees hurt. My fingers ached. But I stood tall. I pulled a folded page from my coat pocket. "This is a letter I wrote 6 years ago," I said. "A letter to myself. A reminder that I still existed. That I still mattered. That even if people tried to erase me, I wasn't erasable. Not by signatures. Not by silence." I paused. "My name is Eleanor Baxter," I said. "I bought that house with my husband Henry in 1983. I raised a son there. I paid for that roof with sacrifice and time. And I was tricked into giving it away by people who told me they loved me." I didn't cry. I let the silence say what tears couldn't. When I sat down, the judge looked at her notes for a long time. Then she leaned forward. "This is not a simple mistake," she said. "This is calculated, systematic, and utterly disgraceful." She turned to Mark and Nina. "You may think this was just paperwork, but the law sees through intention. The house belongs to Mrs. Baxter, effective immediately." Mark blinked. Nina opened her mouth, but the judge lifted a hand. "Don't," she said. "You've said enough." I closed my eyes and breathed. The court gave me back my name, my deed, my authority. But it was what I did next that really mattered. Because the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't go back to the house. Not to live. I could have legally, emotionally, practically, but I didn't. There's a kind of silence that never leaves a room. No matter how many times you paint the walls or open the windows. That silence had soaked into the foundation. Into the tile I once laid by hand. Into the floorboards where Henry and I danced one night after too much red wine and not enough reason. Instead, I turned the house into something else entirely. I called it the hearth. Not a shelter. Not a halfway home. Just a place. A warm place. For women like me. The forgotten ones. I put out flyers at libraries and churches and clinics. I wrote a short line on each. If you've been erased by your own, come home. The first woman who showed up was named Ruth. 68. Her daughter said the guest room needed to be repurposed. Ruth left with a suitcase and her insulin in a grocery bag. Next came Alma. Divorced, widowed, and edged out of her condo by a nephew with promises he never kept. Then came two sisters, Bonnie and Rose, who hadn't spoken in years but reunited in the corner bedroom where the rose curtains still hung. They sat in matching robes, watching old game shows and laughing like girls. We cooked dinner together. Took turns making tea. Some of us couldn't sleep through the night, so we made a tradition of midnight cocoa. No questions, no judgment. Just presence. On the third Saturday, I opened the front porch to anyone who wanted to listen. We set up folding chairs. Ruth made lemonade. Rose baked cornbread. And we shared our stories one by one. We called it the porch light circle, because we were the lights no one thought would burn again. We didn't speak with rage. We spoke with clarity. Nadine told us about signing over her pension for a little help from her grandson. She hasn't seen him since. Sharon shared how her son changed the locks and said it was safer that way. Janelle said her voice had been called too loud at Thanksgiving. Now she barely whispers. One woman said, "I thought I was the only one." I told them, "You're never the only one." That's the lie they tell us, so we stay silent. We don't stay silent anymore. A reporter came, took photos, wrote an article. The headline said, "She lost her home to betrayal. She gave it back to those who needed one most." Under the photo of us, me in my coat, Ruth with her cocoa, Alma waving from the steps, was a quote from me. "This isn't revenge. This is reclamation." I had those words carved into a wooden sign and nailed it to the front gate. But there was one more sign. One that made Nina furious when she saw it in the article. A bronze plaque, right by the mailbox, polished until it shone. It read, "This is a house of memory. The ungrateful may not enter." We got letters after that. From Wisconsin. From Idaho. From Nova Scotia. From widows, mothers, aunts, and teachers. Each one starting the same way. I thought I was the only one. Some asked if they could come visit. Others just wanted to say thank you. Some sent $5 checks. Some sent recipes. One woman sent me a photo of her old kitchen and said, "Your story reminded me that I still exist." I keep every letter. I store them in the cabinet where Mark once kept the cable box. The drawer is labeled proof. Sometimes I sit on the swing out front, the one they almost threw away, and I think about how close I came to being erased. All it would have taken was a little more trust. A little less time. One less neighbor. One less memory. But I remembered. And memory, my dear, is stronger than any signature. You asked me once, what really happened? What did they do? I'll tell you now what I couldn't say before. They called it a small mistake. I called it injustice. The judge called it fraud. And history? History will call it a turning point. Because for every woman like me who speaks, there's another who's been waiting to find her voice. So we speak. We sing. We stay. The hearth still stands. 12 rooms. 7 beds filled. One porch swing, creaky but safe. When newcomers arrive, we greet them with cocoa. Not with questions. We let them rest. Then we listen. And then, when they're ready, we hand them a chair and say, "Tell it. All of it. Loudly. So no one can ever call it a mistake again." Thank you for staying through this whole story. It wasn't easy to tell, but it was necessary. If this story stirred something in you, if you know someone who has been silenced, erased, or made to feel disposable, don't let this be the end. Let it be a beginning. Click subscribe to Grandma Untold True Stories. Hit that bell. Leave a comment. Because when we pass down memory, we don't pass down pain. We pass down power. And remember, darling, revenge has no expiration date. Wisdom doesn't shout. It remembers. And when a grandmother speaks, the world finally listens.